gathered here with a panel to start discussing and reflecting further on what are the efforts, how is it that we can accelerate existing initiatives towards addressing the issue of pollution. When we think pollution and chemicals and waste, we often think dump sites. That's the visible part of the pollution, and it's something that we have all been seeing, whether we are coming from a city or from the countryside. But when we are talking pollution and chemicals, there's also the pollution that is less visible. We know that there can be high level of pesticides in the food that we eat. We also know that endocrine disrupting chemicals can maybe be found in our drinking water, in the personal care products that we use, and in different cleaning solutions. So just because we don't see it, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. A lot has already been done by governments, by industry, by civil society organizations, and by NGOs in addressing the issue of sound management of chemicals and waste. We have legally binding instruments in place, the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, and most recently also the Minamata Convention on Mercury. We also have voluntary policy frameworks in place, like the Strategic Approach on International Chemicals Management, or SICHEM. But while a lot has happened and a lot is being done, we need to do a lot more. We need to be more proactive in addressing the sound management of chemicals and waste. It's no longer enough only to be reactive. But we also need to broadly involve all the stakeholders that covers this topic. It's not only governments, but equally much the industry, civil society, and all the sectors that touches upon chemicals management. And in particular, industry plays an important role. We need to see a further investment on the side of industry, and we need to tap into the resources that industry have in addressing innovation, solution, in looking at entrepreneurship and supporting startups. The aim of the side event today is to discuss with the panel and for the panel to reflect on some of the innovative and inspiring solutions that are already in place. It's for the panel to look at how can we scale up existing efforts. What are the new solutions for the future? How do we turn threats into opportunities? And we need to look at what are the linkages between sound management of chemicals and waste and pollution to other sectors. And there is a clear link when we talk climate change, when we talk microplastics, or when we talk marine plastics litter. With that, I want to say I think we all have a moral requirement to address the issue of pollution, to address the issue of sound management of chemicals and waste. But we also have an economically rational requirement to do so, not only for us, but for the future generations. With that, I wish the panel good luck in its discussions, and back to you, Rolf.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I've got the microphone. Thank you very much, Jacob, and thank you for those inspiring words and really focusing us on the issues that we want to discuss this afternoon in this panel. And as you know, chemicals and waste, and as you've said, is first a human health matter, and we've heard the statistics of how many people, how many millions of people are exposed to the threats of pollution, chemical pollution in particular, and also waste. So the sound management of chemicals and waste is a very important consideration for us, not only as a specialized area, but also for everybody on the planet has to be concerned with chemicals and waste, because, as reiterated by Jacob, it is found in every product, in everything that we have around us. So I just want to emphasize that this is a very important issue. It's an issue that we need to focus on as governments and as international organizations. And I'm hoping from the panel that we have today, we will hear the different dimensions of the sound management of chemicals and waste and where we can come in and what we can do as we develop those partnerships to address some of the challenges that we have before us at this UNIA. The panelists will present to us the diversity of actions as well as initiatives that may be undertaken at different levels to accelerate the sound management of chemicals and waste, especially on legislation, experience on the ground, the role of the private sector, the role of initiatives such as bringing together different clusters like alliances from the private sector, from stakeholders, the social aspects and the dynamics, of course, of the informal sector in some countries. And of course, most importantly, is how can we design future products which are sustainable, and income sustainable chemistry, green chemistry. These are all, I think, important topics and dimensions that the 6 panelists that I have there with us this afternoon will try to explore in the 5 minutes that they've been given. So with this, I'd like to introduce His Excellency, Dr. Alejandro Carufali, who is actually an economist by profession. He's got a PhD in economics, and I'm sure with his exposure to the environment and his work in environment has some very interesting issues to share with us this afternoon, giving, of course, in my view, also the business case or the economic case for sound management of chemicals and waste. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Dower. Thank you to the Joint Secretariat of Basel, Rotterdam Stockholm Convention, dear members of the panel, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure for Uruguay to participate in this side event, sponsor it, and to have the opportunity to share with you our experience in a 7 billion people world, the experience of 3.5 million population country may a priori sound kind of irrelevant, but I think we have something to share with you, and eventually for others to imitate, and to show that no matter how big or little your country is, you can always make a difference with interesting initiatives. We began Uruguay to elaborate a waste management law in a very participative, open to society process a year ago, and by this month of December we expect this to be considered by the Senate and approved and passed as a law and continue its development during the next years. I may also have started by saying that 3.5 million country, 17 times and 45 times smaller than the 2 neighbors, Argentina and Brazil, put us in an interesting situation when it comes to the critical mass of waste that you have there and the interest that you can raise among big companies to come to the country and to process that, because we don't have that critical mass. Waste becomes a challenge because of that. It's not tempting or rewarding to companies to invest in it, and that's how we have to have a national approach and to take the endeavor on our own. The values of the recovery percentage are very low compared to the amount those companies will make in places where bigger concentration of population and much more waste to be recovered. Our country, well, the most of the population centralized in Montevideo, where approximately 1.5 million people live. So in that aspect, we may be similar to small island developing states countries and have to find those solutions for waste on our own, as I said. This draft law was a result of, or is a result of, a multidisciplinary interinstitutional participatory process that all stakeholders had to do with, from the governmental and sub-state level, municipal government, to private sector, civil society, academia, where they were put together to work on this process. We did not have a specific law on waste management in Uruguay until now. We had specific pieces of regulation addressing lead-acid batteries, pesticide containers and obsolete pesticide, packaging, healthcare waste, and industrial waste. That was our regulatory framework until now. Now we want to have a more holistic and comprehensive approach to the whole matter of waste management. and the objective is to position waste as a resource and reduce waste generation and final disposal rates, achieve environmentally sound conditions at the very stage of waste management, to steer the behavior of those who generate waste regarding waste management, segregation at source, for example, to move toward the formalization of waste sector and foster the creation of formal jobs in waste sorting, to promote the social and professional development of waste sorters and their effective social inclusion. So this is a law that has many aspects and goals to achieve through time. Also, there is a financial sustainability waste subsystem goal in all this, with new economic instruments like funds, and also taxes, specific taxes. We hope it will enable the country to, with the national and subnational departmental planning process, move forward to create a sustainable waste management tailored by or to the different realities that we have around the nation. This naturally goes hand in hand with the circular economy, guaranteeing the reliability of the essential financial resources. Characteristics of this regulatory framework: systemic vision, financial, social, and environmental sustainability are taken especially into account. We have also a different level approach to the different realities in the country, local and regional. We recognize that waste is capable of creating value and employment within the framework of a formal productive process, and the internalization of cost of waste management by the generator, that's also one of the aspects. We try to boost our national capacity in the management of waste, and as I mentioned prior to this point, there are some aspects that has to do with social inclusion of a whole sector that has to do with selection, sorting out of waste, that's now being specifically addressed with proper instruments as to capacitate them, giving them the means as to create of it a permanent occupation, formal occupation. And beside that, we create a couple of taxes to fund, to put in two funds devoted to enhance our financial possibilities of giving financial sustainability to the whole process, as I said, to the different levels. The National Waste Management Fund and the Waste Valorization Fund are the two main institutions, financial institutions created, or facilities created that will support this national effort, together with an information system, registry system for selectors or collectors of waste, and participation promotion and education promotion at national level. In terms of waste export, we follow the guidelines of the Parties of Basel Convention on prohibition, and there is also a specific prohibition whenever that would be affecting the sufficient facilities and capacity within the territory of Uruguay to deal with this management. Once this waste law goes into effect, there will be also another complement package of regulation addressing packaging specifically that we hope to have in place next year. Uruguay, as a co-chair of the informal group on household waste set up by the last BRS COP, would like to thank Mauritius, the government of Mauritius, for the introduction thereof, and we also thank the other government, the government of Germany, for co-sponsoring this event, and naturally the BSR Secretariat for this big endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. In fact, I just wanted to add that the government of Uruguay is one of our leaders in the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions, and have been instrumental in allowing the conventions to move forward. So I would like to thank you, Your Excellency, and your government for the commitment and support that you continue to give to the three conventions. and its work, which I think is very important. In particular, like you mentioned, the Household Waste Partnership, which is clearly an initiative from countries from the south, which is Uruguay, two small countries, after all, Uruguay and Mauritius, for which I'm very proud for your engagement in this partnership. So thank you very much. Now I'll move on to our second panelist, who is Dr. Uta Hemming. From the, she's the head of division of the International Chemical Safety and Sustainable Chemistry from the Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, Building and Nuclear Safety of the government of Germany. And Dr. Hemming has a PhD in foods chemistry, so very much chemist, and has also worked very closely with us in the BRS conventions to advance the work of our conventions. But I will let her take the floor now and speak a bit about the experience of Germany in particular, which dates now 4 or 5 decades in the management of chemicals and waste, and really motivate us to tell us that it is possible. Over to you.
Okay. So I hope it works. Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you, Rolf, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this discussion. I do not need to remind everyone in this room of the theme of UNEA 3, Together We Can Beat Pollution. As outlined by Jakob earlier this afternoon, a large part of globally detected pollution comes from chemicals. Some of that being more visible, some less visible. Sound management of chemicals is therefore an important instrument for preventing and reducing pollution. And this is also to be made more visible, and therefore I really appreciate that this UNEA gives us the opportunity to draw the attention of politicians as well as of the public to the central role the sound management of chemicals and waste plays in combating pollution. Chemical pollutants, as well as the chemical components in products, do not respect the borders, as we all know. Therefore, strong action is required on a national level, as just outlined by Uruguay, on a regional level and on a global level. It is quite obvious that the different levels both are and need to be interlinked. Germany adopted its first national law on chemicals in 1980. It replaced existing laws on the state level and complemented more specialized legal areas, like regarding pharmaceuticals. And even in 1980, the national law was already interlinked with European law, and harmonization has progressed since that time. Coming to the global level, the instruments are well known. First of all, there are the legally binding multilateral environment agreements of Minamata, Rotterdam and Stockholm, and referring to waste of Basel. The chemical conventions are very important and effective instruments, but we need to admit that they cover only a small range of substances. As a further instrument, there is the strategic approach to international chemicals management, SAICM. SAICM offers the opportunity to work globally on all issues related to chemicals and hazardous waste that are not covered by the conventions. It is voluntary, multi-stakeholder and a multi-sector approach. The voluntary nature of SAICM could be regarded as a weakness. On the other hand, the multi-stakeholder and the multi-sectorial approach facilitates the cooperation of all relevant stakeholders and sectors and is certainly a strength of SAICM. SAICM's mandate expires in 2020. ICCM4 has initiated an international process to prepare recommendations regarding the strategic approach and the sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020. This is not about reinventing the wheel, but about strengthening the strong points and improving any identified weaknesses of SAICM in order to effectively contribute to further improving chemical safety and combating pollution. The first meeting of the intersessional process took place in Brasilia in February this year. The report and a co-chair summary of the most relevant results of the meeting can be found on the SAICM website. The next meeting is coming up soon and will take place in Stockholm in March 2018. The two co-chairs from Brazil and Canada have developed a so-called co-chairs overview paper, which aims at structuring the discussion during the second meeting. They propose, according to the general principle form follows function, to firstly an in-depth discussion of vision, policy, principles, as well as objectives and milestones, and to develop recommendations that could be considered at the third meeting of the open-ended working group early 2019. Secondly, to shape elements for the issues of implementation, governance, and high-level political commitment that can be further developed at OWG3 and thereafter. Both the co-chairs paper as well as a proposal on objectives in support of the 2030 agenda are published on the SAICM website. The schedule to design future framework for sound management of chemicals is very tight. It is important that all stakeholders prepare very well for the next intersessional meeting and for the meeting of the open-ended working group. Let me close by inviting all of you to get actively involved in the process and to jointly work on the future management of chemicals and waste to further improve chemical safety and to combat effectively chemical pollution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hemming. I think I would like to add my own words to thank you and to thank the government of Germany for their leadership, especially in SAICM. I think we are at a stage where we are looking beyond SAICM and seeing how we can further, as said by Dr. Hemming, strengthen the impact and the effectiveness of SAICM around the world. Because I think we've seen, even from the effectiveness report of the Stockholm Convention, we've seen that persistent organic chemicals have actually decreased through the work we've done with the Stockholm Convention. So these instruments, these multilateral environmental instruments like Minamata, Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm have an impact, and we can measure those impacts. And today we've seen decreases in the use of mercury, in the use of persistent organic pollutants. We need to tackle waste. And I think the solutions that we have with us today, and as demonstrated by many countries, is the answer. I think you've made an important point about not reinventing the wheel. There are so many examples, good examples around the world, both from the developed and developing world, where we can take home and say, look, we need to tackle waste. We need to tackle waste head on. As we move on, our third panel member is Mr. Matthias Schlepp. He's the program director for the World Resources Forum. And in fact, he's just across the road from our offices in the Secretariat, and we've been working together closely to see how we can move forward. And he will specifically focus on the actual, what is happening on the ground and what role the informal sector is playing. I won't steal words from his mouth, so I will hand over to him to do his presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Basel, the Secretariat of the Basel, the Rotterdam, the Stockholm Convention to invite us. This is a great opportunity also for us to present our activities and our projects. The World Resources Forum, together with its partner, the Swiss Federal Laboratories for Material Science and Technology, and funded through the Swiss government, is partnering since several years with developing countries in e-waste recycling projects under the umbrella of our Global Sustainable Recycling Industries program. The United Nations estimates that global e-waste levels will reach 50 million metric tons by 2018. So just next year. In comparison, in 2002, there were only 24 million metric tons of e-waste produced, making e-waste the fastest growing waste stream worldwide. Growth is especially high in developing countries, driven by often illegal shipment of second-hand goods from OECD countries on one hand side, but also through high domestic demand for new electronic devices on the other hand side. As a result, the extraction of materials and components from e-waste has become a profitable business and offers an opportunity for the poor, especially for the poor, to make a daily living. Most recycling is happening in the informal sector. It is estimated that up to 2% of the poorest in this world live off informal recycling activities from all kinds of waste. As circular economy is being discussed as a key concept for our global industries, we need to realize that the informal sector is a key driver for circular economy in developing countries since decades. In many developing countries, informal recycling fills a vacuum that is left by municipalities that are often lacking the legal framework, resource and the capacity to implement the formal waste collection and treatment system. As such, the informal sector contributes to waste reduction, reduces costs related to municipal waste management, and recovers valuable materials which otherwise would be lost. High waste collection rates of up to 80%, which we in OECD countries can just dream of, have been reported for various waste streams. Taking an example for our Indian projects, the informal plastic recycling sector in Delhi involves a staggering 25,000 individuals who are involved in an informal value chain, contributing to a circular economy in India. A well-described cluster is the area called Trikikalan, a trading and sorting cluster located in the east of Delhi. On an area of around 1.5 square kilometers, around 2,000 tons of materials are traded every working day. However, discussions around the informal waste sector are also strongly related to adverse effects for human and the environment. Due to their daily contact with garbage, people working in informal waste management, including children, are exposed to various health threats. In the absence of rules and regulations, materials with no monetary incentives are either not collected, get dumped, or are burned, leading to various adverse effects on the environment. In addition, hazardous chemicals are not removed in the recycling process, leading to cross-contamination of recovered materials in the value chain. Most critical are the impacts on vulnerable workers in the informal sector, such as children and women. Therefore, many of those recycled materials or secondary materials in comparison to primary raw materials, secondary raw materials, as we call them, are not produced in a sustainable way. Still, of course, they find their way back into our consumer products. Your mobile phone might contain copper, which has been recovered by children in Ghana through burning cables. Unlike primary materials, this hasn't been acknowledged as a conflict mineral or as an irresponsible commodity. In fact, for secondary materials in general, sustainable sourcing standards and transparency in secondary supply chains do not exist. This has motivated us to launch a global multi-stakeholder process to address the issue of informality in the recycling sector with a document produced under the International Organization for Standardization. This ISO document was launched this year at the Conference of Parties of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions and provides a framework for inclusive recycling. The framework describes sustainability and traceability requirements for a transparent secondary metals value chain and promotes the formalization of unofficial businesses and subsistence activities, as we call them, hence for those working in the informal sector. We believe that if we want to promote business opportunities in the circular economy of developing countries, accelerating the sound management of chemicals and wastes, it is pivotal to address the informal sector. Hence, we must strive for inclusive recycling processes, promote sustainable supply chains for secondary materials as much as for primary raw materials, and constantly improve the living conditions for those who were actually pioneering the circular economy concept since decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Schlepp. I think sometimes we kind of ignore that sector. Even I, in my own experience in my previous life, suddenly came to realize while trying to solve the solid waste management problems of my country that we're always looking for this very defined, again, it's our thinking in silos, right? We think of these defined sectors, and we forget that the informal sector is quite a powerful force within the economy, not only in recycling, but in many other avenues, and I'm so happy you've really come out and emphasize the role of the informal sector. And I've been talking to a number of delegations here in our COPs, and they've been explaining to me how the informal sector is making solid waste management work. So we see that this is an important Lego block, I put it a Lego block, in the whole solution for national management of solid waste and to really make recycling work. And I think you've also raised the point of the dignity of the workers who work in recycling. I think they are equally important as we are important, and where we guarantee occupational safety for us in our work and everywhere, we should also look at ways for guaranteeing their safety, their health, and their well-being. And I think we need to elevate, recyclers to be important jobs and important careers. And in fact, just to recall, watching a BBC documentary on an important group of people in Egypt who have specialized, in fact, on recycling of waste, and it's basically community-based, but the amount of tons of waste that they are able to process and package is simply amazing. So thank you for bringing and shedding light on this important issue. Now, in connection with, as you can see, we aim to have a gender balance panel. So I will now invite our colleague from the World Economic Forum, Ms. Antonia Gowell, head of the Circular Economy Initiative, to tell us about the role of the private sector and how we can synergize with the private sector to bring about, solutions, but also to look at the issue of the sound management of chemicals. And I think you have an interesting example to share with us. So over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much for having us here. Maybe just firstly, for those who are not familiar with the World Economic Forum, we're basically an international institution for public-private collaboration. So really that's kind of at the heart of what we do and how we build all of our efforts, is how across different issues from gender parity to the future of financial systems, and then in my case, looking at the future of environment and natural resource security, can we really kind of galvanize different stakeholders, business, government, as well as academics, kind of technology pioneers around addressing some of these particular challenges. So that's sort of the way in which we operate, I suppose. So I suppose in particular in the context of chemicals and waste, I think as was mentioned, I had the circular economy program at the forum. And I think that what that means is what we try to do is to look at the entire system, the entire kind of economic system, but also if you think about chemicals and waste, is that's obviously connected to everything that comes before it, right? So yes, how do we look at managing waste downstream, but how do we engage with all of the actors upstream as well, be it the governments, be it the companies, to actually ensure that, as much waste doesn't even get downstream, and if it does come downstream, how do you really attribute value to the waste such that it can re-enter into products? And so in some cases, that really does require engaging with some of the big market players as well. So I guess, specifically, to speak to some of these areas, I mean, we are looking at the broader circular economy transition, but to do that, you need to look at particular issues and areas. I think, already was discussed electronic waste. We know if we look even more broadly at connected devices, we're going from a situation of having about 10 billion connected devices today to a situation where by 2020, that number is going to more than triple. So the amount of throughput of materials, which currently will likely enter waste streams, is escalating massively. Another example is plastics. I won't speak to that issue now, but in collaboration with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and a number of partners, really looking and putting on the table some of these systemic issues in terms of tackling plastics pollution. The third area, which I'll explain a little bit about, is batteries. So we talk about the clean energy transformation, the digital transformation, as well as the transformation in mobility and energy systems. All of this is necessary to achieve the Paris Agreement, moving towards renewable energy technology, providing incredible benefits through connectivity, in particular in developing markets, which is one of the largest growing markets. The common trend across all of those sectors is batteries. All of the growth, kind of the global growth in the battery market is expected to go from about $65 billion today to about $100 billion by 2025 as all of these technologies scale and really the use therefore of batteries increases significantly. And so basically as we look at this trajectory and this challenge, I mean what you do then is you look across the entire battery value chain, and you identify and see actually quite a number of significant issues that need to be addressed. If you look at, for example, cobalt extraction, graphite extraction from the kind of mining processes, there's incredible kind of health, safety, human rights challenges associated with those value chains. As the demand for those materials increases significantly, not only do you need to address those downstream challenges, but also, again, if you go all the way through the value chain, how do you increase, for example, the reuse, recycling of those materials to kind of mitigate that increase in demand? Again, kind of that circular economy approach. If you go through to the kind of the middle part in terms of the use, reuse, recycling of be it lead acid batteries, lithium ion batteries, and any future battery technologies that are going to come about, we know that there are significant challenges today in terms of the management of, for example, lead acid batteries, and I think colleagues have spoken to the health and safety issues there, as well as the importance that plays in the livelihoods of millions of people. So how do you do that and manage that in a really engaging way? So again, a challenge today. Looking to the future, we do have lithium-ion batteries, growing in terms of the market use, as well as future, innovations, which we don't necessarily have sight of as yet. How do we, again, collaborate to put in place the right systems, the right regulations, the right processes to manage that growing battery demand and impact at the end of the day? And then finally, innovation, and I think that this will be the subject of one of the other pieces, is at the forum, we talk a lot about what we call the fourth industrial revolution. So what that means is that we know there's, in addition to kind of everybody having a mobile phone, there's a lot of incredible innovation happening, from artificial intelligence to the use of kind of blockchain technologies, a huge amount of innovation that is suddenly giving us a lot of interesting and new tools that can solve what might have previously been difficult and expensive challenges. So part of it is to look at what are the future innovations coming that might help us, for example, kind of engage the informal sector in terms of waste management through distributed kind of value provision to individuals on the ground, the tracking of some of these resources through the entire value chain, the ability to kind of attribute value and enhanced value to some of the secondary materials that are coming online. So what are those new forward-looking innovations that can be applied not just in developed markets, but also in many developing markets, which are becoming increasingly connected to help address some of these challenges? And how do you combine that with the collaborations and the resources, be it from governments, regional development banks, to address some of the downstream challenges in terms of waste management at the end of the day? So for us, we launched the Global Batteries Alliance, and I've been talking to some of the pillars of that work, looking at innovation, looking at kind of the use, reuse, management of batteries, as well as looking at the kind of extraction of the materials that are going into those batteries, and how do we really transform that towards a system that is fundamentally more sustainable, recognizing that these are fundamental to achieving our climate goals, for example. We know that we need to achieve other objectives. So in a way, I guess that's where, for us, the circular economy mindset is really important, is that and I think this was referred to, is you cannot think in siloed approaches. You cannot think as the energy sector, the clean energy transformation is the solution. You need to think outside your sphere and your box of influence to think about, okay, what are the secondary impacts? How do we mitigate and ensure that we address all of those, but while kind of leveraging the benefits as well? And for us, this is where public-private collaboration, as well as collaboration with a lot of the international organizations working in this space, the implementing agencies, the regional development banks, because it's truly, these issues are not ones that can be addressed in isolation and through independent and small-scale projects. So that's just one example that we wanted to share, and hopefully that's useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gawal. In fact, what I'm going to say is not really totally against regulatory frameworks and MEAs, but we have to appreciate that the private sector can take on board initiatives and address some of the challenges that we have before us. And I think we don't always need regulations and laws to address these challenges. And I think we have so many examples around us where the private sector have taken initiative to address some of the challenges we have. So the answer always doesn't lie in laws and regulations. I think this is our last resort, and I think we need to work together as countries, as private sector, as NGOs, as stakeholders to address those solutions, because some of those solutions, as I've mentioned before, are actually low-hanging fruits. And I was just talking to a colleague from the US who has been championing the removal of lead from paint and lead-acid batteries and other uses. I mean, why are we not getting rid of lead in paint once and for all? I remember when I graduated from university, I developed the first standards, and you can see my age. I won't tell you my age. That was a long time ago. I developed the standards in Seychelles for removal of lead in paint. And that was a long time ago. So it's a shock today where we still have countries, still have companies who still have lead in paint. For me, this is something that we can wake up tomorrow and say no lead in paint, no more. And industry doesn't need to make huge investments or lose market share by changing the formulation for removing lead in paint. And I'm telling you because I'm passionate about it, and I know industry can do it, and I know there are solutions. I've even been talking to the representative of the Global Paint Association, and we can get rid. So let's get those low-hanging fruits out of the way, and let's go and tackle the big and more complex issues like lead-acid batteries, which I think is quite a complex, because lead-acid batteries is all over the world. They've been used everywhere, from cars to mobility equipment, but also now increasingly in renewable energy. There's new types of batteries, battery technology coming up with more sophisticated technologies. So we have in front of us more challenges. So let's be committed to solve those that we have been able to solve. And with this, I'd like to introduce Dr. Frege, we've been working together. In fact, we've been part of the steering committee to establish this new organization on sustainable and green chemistry. And in fact, while we are firefighting, we should also now be thinking ahead, designing new products, new chemicals that are safe, that contribute to our sustainable development. I won't say much on this, but I would like him maybe to stimulate you and to engage you into what this new organization will do and how it will support this technological development and innovation in chemistry and in new products that are safe and kind to us and our planet. Over to you, Dr. Frege.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I hope I can fulfill your expectation and stimulate this debate. Well, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, well, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and thanks to the BRS Secretariat for this very kind invitation. Well, I'm in a panel with a lot of organizations who are well known and well respected. Probably the International Sustainable Chemistry Collaborative Center is not yet. We are a new institution, a new international independent, sitting, let's say, in Bonn, and we basically want to stimulate the breakthrough of sustainable chemistry. Well, what is this? Well, as you have discussed a lot here, of course, the chemical sector and chemistry is a problem with regard to pollution. But if you look at it from the other end, well, it's also a big part of the solutions. And sustainable chemistry is a lot about innovation, for a circular economy. And for us, this is a process which we start, an adventure which we start, let's say, to stimulate those innovations for new products, for new molecules and new processes which reduce basically the pollution and which contribute, let's say, also to combat climate change, which is another big issue which we just discussed just a few weeks ago in, let's say, at the COP in Bonn. Well, the improvement of product design is in the heart of it, because products, like just said, lead in paint, well, are a big problem with regard to pollution. Well, a lot of pollution comes from products, yeah, being plastics, let's say, or other examples. Well, what is IAC3? Well, we are a global acting think tank, an innovator, an incubator. We want to stimulate collaboration, that's in our name, between sectors and actors, and this on the global level, because we think that only if the different actors come together between the different industries and the startups and the research, only there, well, the real innovation will take place. So we basically work on 3 issues. We work on collaboration, we work on innovation, and we work on education. Well, why do we work on education? Because it all starts with the mindset. While the mindset should be entrepreneurial and on one end, but it should also, let's say, have what you discuss here, have this, let's say, always in your mind, in particular what was said by the colleague from the World Economic Forum, this system approach, that you don't look only always at the part and in a little sector and in a little molecule, but you have the whole system in mind when you discuss new solutions. And that is what we have done, for example, now recently in summer schools, in workshops in Ghana and in Vietnam, and we have also trainings in place where we try to, let's say, to get this in particular also into developing countries. And collaboration, well, we initiated the global scenario process together with UNEP to identify the major issues. Well, where are the problematic areas on the different continents, but also where, let's say, where we have the breakthrough innovations. And this will be part of the Global Chemicals Outlook. We are happy that we can be part of it and bring in some of the solutions. And what we need there is really disruptive business models. It's not that we need minor little changes here and there. It's really disruptions. And the disruptions will mainly come not from the big players. A lot of the disruptions will come from the startups, from small companies, from the research community, and not only in developed countries. A lot of already we have identified in developing countries. We have done a workshop together with UNEP on startup companies, and you would be amazed how much good ideas are there in this world. But these ideas, very often they don't make it to the market. I give you 2 examples. We had from the university, from a university in Colombia, we had an idea on a biological process to replace mercury for artisanal gold miners. Well, it would work tomorrow in the same way as mercury, but now the big question is, how do we get this to the market? Yeah. Well, we had another innovation from the US, where you can basically, when you have oil spills, where you can, let's say, turn the oil into fish food. Yeah, so these type of ideas, just as examples, and these good solutions, the problem is they very often don't make it to the markets, because in chemistry you need a lot of, let's say, investments before you get to real prototypes. That's very often the case. It's not like in IT, yeah, where a lot of the innovations are quite cheap. You can do them in the garage. Yeah, what we all know. But no, this is a different story very often in our areas, and today a lot can happen only in collaboration between the different sectors, because if you look at products for a circular economy, which are at the end of the day not polluting, you need to bring in the different people together, let's say from the car industry, the battery producers, yeah, and when they discuss, let's say, together, then you get into new solutions. Well, what we are going to do is to start a global startup service, so which will be a global network of startup companies, because they need people to help them to communicate. They need trainings in order to get, let's say, to business models, and they need also demonstration cases, yeah, to demonstrate the world that they have the better solutions. And batteries is an example. Well, batteries is a very typical example where we go down a way because we want to stimulate e-mobility, we want to stimulate, let's say, new ways of energy storage, but at the moment we go down a way which is not sustainable. The batteries of today are not sustainable chemistry because there is no recycling methodology, for example, for lithium batteries. So why are we going, and this is a typical example that one sector, for example, promotes let's say electromobility, but there is no entire solution. So there is no system thinking in place when you talk about this, and this is what we really need to do. And this is why we will work, let's say with these startup companies. We will do an assessment which solutions are really sustainable in terms of entire system thinking, and then probably go even to a startup ranking. Where are the best ones? Not only in terms of business and environment, but also, let's say, with a social view. Because we believe, well, the transformation we have to do, a lot will come through business models. I don't say that you don't need legislation and economic incentives, but the new business models will be the core of the transformation. And this is, let's say, basically our motto. Well, say we want to shape this transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Frederick. I think this is the kind of momentum that we need. This is the kind of aspiration that we need. And I think you made a very important point that innovations is not only coming from developed countries, but it's also coming from developing countries. In fact, I visited one of our Stockholm regional centers here, which is based here, and I invite you during the time of uni, I'm spending a few days, go and visit that center. It's called Municipal. You can find it on the web. They actually, this is quite funny, they found that the sweat glands or the sweat from a particular animal keeps tsetse fly awake. Tsetse flies kills a lot of people in Africa every year. And they've been able to extract this sweat and turn it into a little liquid that you put around the necks of the cows, and I'm assuming people as well, which can keep away the tsetse fly. This is a homegrown innovation. It is not involving chemicals, because the sweat from your sweat glands, as you know, it degrades, it's organic, it biodegrades in the environment. These are, for me, some of the clear examples where we should be going, where we should be looking at, and as much as possible, stimulate ground-up startups. And while you were talking, we had a retreat for BRS a week ago, and I could not be there, but my staff came back and told me, you know, why don't we explore crowd funding? I said, good idea. We should, for sustainable chemistry, look at crowdfunding. What are people interested in? What are consumers interested in? What are the things that they would like to see startups or industry develop so it can improve their lives, make their lives more healthier? And I think this consumer relationship with private sector, with startups, I think needs to be further explored, because I think many consumers now are very sensitive about chemicals and products which are found in our homes, and they want to do something about it, but really probably don't have a venue or an avenue for it. What about crowdfunding? Just an idea to throw to you. Now, we have some time, which is great. We have about 20 minutes for discussion, so I'm opening the floor now for questions to our panelists. I think we've covered a whole range of issues here, from both national perspectives, international perspectives, private sector, role of informal sector, and of course being more avant-garde, looking at sustainable chemistry and how we can design products and systems and materials that bring us ahead towards sustainable chemistry. So I'll just open the floor now for questions, comments, and contributions. So over to you, colleagues. Madam, just please introduce yourself when you take the floor. Thank you.
Can you hear me like this? Jody Roussel with the Global Solar Council. My question is regarding the point raised by a number of speakers about sustainable waste management for the battery supply chain and batteries, e-waste in general. We in the solar industry have a nonprofit organization that was founded by industry partners that coordinates e-waste management. It was initially led in reaction to the European Commission's legislation on e-waste, the WE Directive, and beyond being a voluntary vehicle, subsequently became a vehicle for industry to comply not only in Europe, but now all over the world to recycle solar panels. They're now 98% recyclable. My question to the panel is, where do you see the opportunity for nonprofit vehicles like the one we have in the solar industry called PV Cycle to form in the battery sector so that industry can be solving its own problems under regulatory guidance from government?
Anyone to venture? Yes, thank you.
Sure. I mean, I think that the combination, I suppose, of individual sectoral answers is really a good start, of course. Between, I suppose, the renewable energy sector and, for example, the automotive sector, there's obviously differences in terms of volumes, and also the electronic sector. There's economic differences in terms of how difficult it is to actually gain access to some of the materials at the end of the day. And that's, I think, where the combination of the kind of market collaboration as well as some of the regulations is quite important, and also the incentives in terms of the value, kind of access to the value of those materials is really important, and that's in a way why you need actually that entire system to function. So there's a sort of the small scale distribution challenge, as well as in some cases the large scale management of actually quite large volumes of waste. And so I think that replicating the kind of approach that you have for solar systems across other industry sectors would certainly be really helpful. What it doesn't necessarily always address is the economics of it, as well as some of the regulations that you actually might need in place to facilitate, for example, the processing management movement of some of those, of some of the products at the end of the day, i.e. the batteries. So you kind of need both. You need the regulations, you need the economic incentives or drivers, as well as the partnership with the industry to make it function at scale. I think that's the other really important thing, is it's an issue that needs to be addressed globally. So I think for me it is really the combination of the three elements that are critical.
Thank you. Anyone with any experience? Yes, Frederick.
Well, just two thoughts. Well, the first thing is solar panels. You know, what I think is that we have to go into the production in the first place. You know, now it's a recycling problem, but what if we would have seen that in the first place as an entire system? We would have probably come to a different design. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, what we need to look, let's say, much closer. And then I found it interesting that you said it is the battery problem is an industry problem. Well, it's not an industry problem. Of course, industry is producing it, but it's not only, it's an industry problem as well, but it's a problem also of the legislator and of the technologies which are promoted also today. So it's a problem what we, let's say, what the society has at the end of the day, and not only the industry, and we have to look it from that angle.
Thank you. I mean, I will add my 2 cents worth, and looking at the problematic of batteries, I mean, there's been initiatives, and I think we should reinforce this, is who owns the battery? Do I borrow the battery and then give it back? You see, this is an important one. I mean, for an electric car, I mean, I'm not interested in the battery. I'm interested in the car moving. So, and also it will solve the problem of mobility in electric cars. Why can't I stop at a petrol station, at a recharge station, swap my battery for something else? So I don't own the battery, and it's owned by different companies, you know, and these companies have systems in place when those batteries reaches an end life, and you avoid the problematic of having battery ownership with all millions of consumers. So that's one way out. I mean, people have been talking about battery banks. We also have intelligent electric systems now. We can detect which batteries are failing and communicate to the owners that the batteries need to be replaced, and have a reclaim system. What about pushing, you know, for example, exchange of mobiles? Everybody changes mobiles every other year. Why can't we sensitize consumers to bring back their mobiles to their agent or to their supplier and bring it back and get another one back, like we've done with, I think in many countries there have been the incandescent lamp, right? We've had initiatives at the local level in order to address issue of renewable energy. Mercury is, if you're changing your bulb, and this has been very successful in many countries, you bring your old bulb and we give you or we give you at a good price fluorescent or the new LED lamp. So like I was saying before, there's so many initiatives, and we need to see how we can build in. And it's great to hear that in the solar panel industry that they are looking at recyclable, because I've been thinking for a while now, in 20 years' time, what are we going to do? Because that's a lifetime, average lifetime of a solar panel. What are we going to do with the mounting, and whether we're going to now talk about a partnership on management of solar panels. So it's great, this thinking ahead as we enter into a more renewable energy market. Anyone wants to, you wanted to add? Yes, sorry.
I guess just to kind of emphasize, which the two speakers pointed out, is the issue of business model transformation fundamentally, as well as therefore differences in design. I mean, what we're seeing is a number of companies that are moving towards these service-based business models. I know there's a colleague from Philips Lighting here. Is that actually what that does? If you turn towards a more, shall we say, lease-based model, not an ownership model, what that means is, as a company, you are incentivized to fundamentally change the longevity of that product, the modularity of that product, the ability to refurbish and remanufacture components of that product, such that you're actually giving it a much longer lifetime because it's kind of an embedded economic incentive from that leasing model. In addition to then, being able to dismantle it more easily for at some point when you might need to kind of recycle some of the materials within those products. And that's where I think kind of really that going upstream to look at actually the fundamental core of the waste problem and think about those different transformative approaches that can really mitigate it and also decouple resource consumption at the end of the day, which is really what we're trying to get at as well. So yeah, just that design business model transformation, but coupled with, I think there is still need obviously for regulations in many contexts as well. So it's not a one in all solution.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Yes, madam.
Hi. Thank you. I don't have a question, but I have an intervention on what United Arab Emirates is doing currently on chemical and waste, if you allow me. Thank you. In chemical, actually, we import and use the chemical and pesticide which are harmful to the environment and health, and ozone-depleting substance have been restricted in UAE within the issue of implementing of federal law and regulation, such as banning, controlling, and restriction. All chemical products imported and moderated in the UAE customs, and the supply of and store of those chemicals are audited and regulated by the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment in UAE. Awareness program, we are conducting many awareness programs within the local authority and stakeholders about environment, health risk, and associated with important and use of harmful chemical and pesticides as well. Initiatives to promote green natural products in place of chemicals and pesticides are taking in place. A draft of national strategy has been developed for sound management of chemical in the UAE, and separated legislations have been introduced to control and the use of import pesticides. In terms of hazardous waste, UAE government has issued specific regulation to manage hazardous waste. Separated hazardous waste facilities have been constructed for safe and disposals. Some of the hazardous waste, like waste industrials, oil, and others items have been disposed safely in cement clinkers. SPLs, spit pot lines from aluminium industries are being disposed through the cement factories as well. In terms of municipal solid waste, currently there are many waste recycling and composting plants in UAE. With an average of 22% recovery, the balance of 78% of municipal solid waste is diverted to the landfill. Within the UAE 2021 vision towards sustainable environment, the target for treatment of municipal solid waste is set as a 75% within 25% disposal to the landfill. Recently, new waste legislation for the reduction and reuse, recycling, and treatment of municipal solid waste have been met to the vision of 2021 for the UAE towards sustainable environment. And also, Ministry of Climate Change and Environment has been finalizing the construction of residual derived or RDF fuel plant to treat 1,000 TPD municipal solid waste, and supply of RDF to the cement plant in co-incineration with the coal. This will reduce the consumption of fossil fuel implemented, and then the additional RDF plant can be constructed. The RDF can also be used in fuel on-run waste-to-energy power plant as well. Thank you. This was my intervention.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from the UAE. Any reactions from the panel? No? No? Anyone else from the floor? Yes, sir. NGOs.
And thank you. I'm Shahriar Hussain from Bangladesh, Environment and Social Development Organization. Actually, my question is to the panel about the e-waste recycling. The e-waste recycling, we know that the last 6 and 7 years, most of the developing countries are struggling with the recycling process, and it is not still yet working. So what is the mechanism that the national government can adopt the safe recycling process? And the recent phenomena is that the e-waste recycling byproduct is going for material as a raw material for children products, particularly the toys. So this is definitely harmful and hazardous. So how we could deal with this issue? Thank you very much.
Thank you for raising such an important issue. Yes, so from the World Business Council.
There's of course there's no solution which fits it all. No, it's in Western countries, OECD countries, we are used to the extended producer responsibility approach, which is not just applicable maybe in every other country, not even among the OECD countries. This is a totally common standards how it's implemented. But I would say start with assigning responsibility. I think it's the core of the thing. So extended producer responsibility might be a way of assigning responsibility, but the stakeholders in a system, they need to know what their responsibility is, and I think that's confusing still in many countries. It's not clear who has actually the responsibility. The next thing, especially in developing countries, is which was actually the core of my intervention, is the informal sector. We don't have a level playing field in this country. So the informal sector, not by abusing a system or whatever, just by not knowing how actually it could be done different, or not by having the incentive to do it different, they concentrate on valuable fractions, while somebody who wants to do it right has to bear the costs of the non-valuable fraction, or the fractions which need special treatment, no, and disposal, and which cost something. So I think that's also something we have to work on. It's in the end we are not getting around, especially with e-waste recycling, that this costs something. I think this is also something. It's just in many countries, it's not just India, it's in many other countries that it's not possible that this has to cost something, because we have all the gold in our mobile phones and everything. How can this cost something? But it's just not, with the very low raw material prices, it's just not the case that this pays for everything. So that's definitely brings us back to responsibility. Who pays for actually the thing which doesn't have a value? And I think there we need responsibility, control, level playing field, and of course we need finances.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Madam, is it? Yes.
Oh, hi, I'm Judy. I work with Wildlife Direct. On what he had just asked right now, I've just remembered something. When it comes to the developing country, the countries right now, they have already reached, we can say they have reached the industrialization point of actualization maybe, but now the developing countries are still yet to get to their industrialization point that they can say they actually in a point of industrialization. That's why you see the developing world, the developing countries. But now, when it comes to the carbon emissions, at what point, okay, is there a way that the world can actually deal with that issue? Because now it seems like the developing countries actually are emitting more carbon, and they are emitting carbon than what was already been put. Is there a way that the world can actually make everything to be at par when it comes to the carbon emissions and the pollution in the international field?
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is definitely a discussion in the climate change arena, but I just wanted to highlight that there are very clear linkages between climate change, chemicals, and waste. And as you know, the more we landfill, the more we produce methane, and the more we create, and methane is a very strong climate forcing agent, which actually, can cause climate change. But there's also other practices, and I think a lot of industry now is very sensitive about their carbon footprint. So even in the manufacturing of different products, the carbon footprint is also now part of this. But I would just suggest that this is a discussion on carbon emissions, although it's a chemical, is better suited for the climate change debate. Do I have any further interventions, questions from the floor? So thank you very much. What remains now is for me to do a quick wrap-up so that we have some take-home messages. And I wish to thank you all for coming to this, I think, which in my view, a very important side event, which covered the whole range of issues related to the sound management of chemicals. And we heard from Ambassador Garofali from Uruguay, who spoke from his country experience, a small country which had the challenges of solid waste, and how they've upgraded, reformed their solid waste management legislation, and how this now is having a trickling effect, and how it is linked to the economy. And I'm tempted to say the solid waste management problem is not an environmental problem, if you get what I mean. It's an economic issue. And I won't even say a problem, it's an economic solution. It creates jobs, it creates opportunities, it creates innovation. And I think we need to change our approach, and our governments need to change their approach when it deals with waste. Waste is not something that we send to the Ministry of Environment to tackle because this is their problem. It's a national issue, and I think the theme of UNIA dealing with beating pollution, and you've heard a lot of side events on marine plastics, or resolution on marine litter, marine plastics. The solution, yes, is picking up the litter from the oceans, but the solution is further upstream. Better, and more sounder management of solid waste. And I think and the importance of social inclusion in the whole process, multi-stakeholder involvement in the whole process is simply important. You will not have successful management of waste. Dr. Emming, from her side, has emphasized the role of the international platform for moving forward on the issue of chemicals and waste, the role of SICAM, the importance of the conventions and the MEAs and the role they play, the importance of partnerships and the role they play, and of course strengthening our resolve on the international level. Yes, we come here to negotiate, but we have to negotiate with purpose, negotiate with action, negotiate with results, and I think this is what UNIA brings us together here to do, is to negotiate for a better planet and a better world. And thank you, Dr. Emming, for pushing this message to us this afternoon. Mr. Schlepp, on e-waste recycling and how it is important, and to emphasize the role of the informal sector or people involved in recycling, and how important it is to also give them the dignity that they deserve. But most importantly, raised by somebody from the floor, is how we ensure that we have a global recycling system that works. And today, the Basel Convention is critical in that process, and I invite you, parties and countries in support to continue developing the Basel Convention as this global instrument and platform to allow the sound exchange of waste. I'm calling it that way so that you understand what I'm trying to say. Because the illegal trade in waste is growing, and all countries are affected. You know, our borders, it's already difficult to manage our borders from drugs, from illegal arms trade, and from a lot of other issues, but animal trade, species trade, and the growth of illegal trade in e-waste for recycling is so big, you can't imagine how much money is generating for these illegal activities. How do we channel, how do we transform this illegal trade into something that is legal? It is something that is proper, and it's something that works for countries. And I think this is where we should be moving, and where we should be aiming to develop the Basel Convention, to enable countries to really exchange information, exchange waste in the most transparent and environmentally sound manner. And Ms. Gavel from the World Economic Forum, this is a very important forum who championed the discussion on the fourth revolution, which I'm sure you've all been following very closely. Is our next revolution? How are we preparing ourselves for a renewable energy revolution, for a new revolution where information is actually key to help us address the issues that the challenges we have. And it's been raised here. How can information help us address consumerism, waste, and all these issues that we are discussing this week? The importance of downstream management, the importance of private sector-led initiatives, and the importance of moving away from silos and using a systems approach to dealing with some of these challenges. And Dr. Bath, who's at the forefront now setting up this important institution in Bonn, how do we stimulate innovation? How do we get the crowds, our consumers, to participate and to get engaged, not only in funding, but in ideas, in motivating industry and startups to look at those solutions, and how we can create disruptive business models that can allow us to make this jump into this fourth revolution. I think for me it has been really a very exciting discussion, exciting debates, and I would like to thank first our distinguished opener of our panel, Jacob Badua, who's now the head of the chemicals branch in UNEP, in UN Environment, sorry. And of course our distinguished panels here from both countries and industry and NGOs. And I would like to thank you all for your attention. And as you know, this has also been a live cast, so other people from around the world has been watching this event here. We don't yet have the technology to get them to ask panelists the questions, but I'm hoping in the future we'll have a much more engaging as well with the rest of the world who's also not able to be here with us. So once again, thank you very much, and I wish you a successful UNIA 3. Thank you.
Thank you.